I want to thank the DuPage Organic Garden Club for allowing me to present this presentation, and the Carroll Stream Public Library for hosting it and taking care of all of that techie stuff. And I especially want to thank Laura Hayes of the library for polishing my PowerPoint. I got to start off by saying I am not an expert on succulents. A year and a half ago, I couldn't have told you what a succulent was or wasn't. I couldn't have told you what made it a succulent and whether cacti were succulents or not. To answer that last little bit, all cacti are succulents, but not all succulents are cacti. More about that to come. Anyway, early fall of 2019, my wife suggested that I take up a hobby and join a club so I could meet some new people, make some new friends, and I think to get me out of the house. I've always enjoyed plants and gardening, and I've been interested in cacti for a long time. I've had a few over the years, but I never managed to keep them alive for very long. So I joined the Cacti and Succulent Society of Greater Chicago. They met once a month in River Forest, Illinois, before the COVID. It was great. Club has been around since '79, and several of the original members are experts in the field. Every month they did a show and tell. They had a speaker or someone else do a presentation, and best of all, the members would bring in free samples. Not always, but often pups and cuttings or seedlings appeared. They, just like you, now meet via Zoom. Check out their Facebook page. I confess I went a little bit crazy in the beginning. I bought a bunch of interesting specimens. Every big box store, home center, etc. carries cacti and succulents, and they're often pretty reasonable. Have I mentioned that I'm very frugal? Not cheap, frugal. But I found out that when Walmart, for example, wants to clean out a specific set of plants, they mark them down in half from like $3.74 as the original price to $1.87, eventually 94 cents. So those also has a reduced shelf where you can buy wilted, desiccated, or otherwise damaged plants for $1. So I didn't feel too guilty about rescuing a number of those little plants. The problem was I was killing them off as quickly as I bought them. Some were too far gone to be saved, but I had to stop and say, what's going on? So I started reading some stuff online and started asking questions of the other club members. I found out that there are some basic principles you can follow that almost guarantee success with succulents. Now, I don't have a large collection of plants. I have between 35 and 38 total. Half are succulents, half are cacti. I I made a vow last January that I wasn't going to buy anything new until I had managed to keep everything I had already alive for at least 1 year. But don't worry, I'll tell you how you can get all the plants you want for free. I'm a little hesitant, as I mentioned earlier to a couple of people, that about presenting this to you because most of you probably know this stuff already. You're familiar with plant requirements for light, water, and food, what types of soil mixtures work best, and what insect pests to watch out for. So I'm going to try to tailor my remarks to the differences in basics that apply specifically to cacti and succulents. Anyway, we'll start with an Echeveria. This is one of the most popular and common succulents. You find them for sale everywhere in various colors. There are over 100 to 150 different species. Echeverias are named after a Mexican botanical artist of the late 1700s, back when botany explorers couldn't grab a colored camera to document their finds. Here's a brief outline of what we will cover. What is a succulent, and where do succulents store water? Are cacti succulents? How do cacti differ from other succulents? And then I'll go through 7 steps to success: light, water, nutrients, substrate, potting, insect pests, and propagating. Anyway, this next slide shows, this is actually a regular jade plant, Prassula ovata, but specifically this is a cultivar named Hobbit. It has those kind of Shrek-like ears, so I like it. Anyway, a cultivar means that somebody somewhere, a grower, noticed this sport or oddity and cultivated or bred these plants to continue, probably through clones, and now they breed true. So what exactly is a succulent? Any plant that has adapted to store water in some part of itself. Succulents may store water in their leaves, like lithops, commonly known as living stones. They may actually store water in their roots, like Adenium obesum, that you would know as the desert rose, and in their stems, like almost all cacti. Lithops are a very basic plant. They have only 2 leaves. They have almost no stems to speak of, and kind of a sketchy root system. The 2 leaves grab each other tightly, clenched together, so that they kind of look like a cork sticking out of the ground. The new leaves, and notice the cross section on the right, they sprout up inside the plant, and they grow up within the old leaves, pushing up and out and forcing the old leaves to the side, where the old leaves die away. So at any point, it only has 2 leaves. But in the wild, these plants they're really interesting. They're almost buried in the ground. That crease in the middle is where the 2 leaves join each other, where they meet up together. On top, you can see that pattern in it. That's translucent. It actually lets more light in for photosynthesis. I'm sorry I have to show you book pictures, but I don't have any of these in my collection. Nor do I have any of the desert roses, Adenium obesum. Those are succulents that store water in their roots, so the bottom or the base of the root will swell up and look kind of like an onion. The root is called a caudex. It's mostly buried underground. When people repot them and they're sold in the stores, they usually pull the root up to expose that big bulbous part because it looks better. It's kind of showy. Now, most cacti store water in their stems. You've all heard of people that are stranded in the desert and they dig into a cactus to get at the water inside. So, back to what I said at the beginning. All cacti are succulents, but not all succulents are cacti. There are at least, cacti are only one type of succulents. There are at least 10,000 plus species of succulents. Of those, about 1,300 are cacti. These are actually conservative numbers. Some sources will say 1,750 species of cacti, and out of as many as 20,000 species of succulents. Succulents are actually grouped into about 60 different families. If you go down another couple of levels to the genus, the Mammillaria genus of cacti by itself has over 300 species. And on top of this, you have to add dozens and dozens, and probably hundreds of hybrids every year. This next one is not hundreds or even dozens. It's just my plants in their summer home on my deck. I use cinder blocks, leftover cedar planks from when I built the deck a couple of years ago, and some red plastic trays to kind of keep things level and help them balance better on the planks. So, how do cacti differ from other succulents? In one word, areoles. The spines of a cactus grow out of flattened white spots called areoles. Those are actually vestigial branches. The spines are actually vestigial leaves. The difference is, and notice, the spikes on succulents are called thorns. They do not grow from areoles. Succulents don't have areoles. Now, the bodies of cacti are the original adapted stems. And if you notice, cacti almost all have bumps or ridges on them. Those act like bellows, and they expand or contract as water is added. If you look at this one, this is a baby golden barrel cactus, I think. Echinocactus grusonii. Notice how the spines, which are the vestigial leaves, grow out of the areoles. That's what distinguishes true cacti from succulents that just look like cacti, such as this next, Euphorbia trigona. On the left is the Euphorbia trigona, that's a succulent, the African milk plant. On the right is a true cactus, that's Myrtillocactus geometrizans, called the blue flame or blue torch. That one on the left, Euphorbia, may get to be 9 feet tall. I want you to remember Euphorbia genus because it's huge, they're not all succulents. Now notice, spiky succulents have thorns, not spines, which just grew up on top of the plant's surface, not from the areoles. Notice now the close-ups of both. The cacti on the right, Myrtillocactus, has the spines protruding out of, growing out of the areoles. The one on the left are more like thorns. They're on top of the surface. So next, what we have is just I can show you these more, that's to come. Notice that those ridges are common sometimes in succulents too, especially those that have grown up in the same type of conditions as cacti. Anyway, another variants are different. Not all cacti grow in deserts. Some actually grow in jungles, like Schlumbergera. You would know them as Christmas, Thanksgiving, or Easter cacti. There are 3 different species. 2 of them are different genera. And you can actually tell them apart by the shapes of the little pads. They're not leaves. When cacti grew in the jungles, they adapted to the trees. Their stems evolved into broader, flattened shapes in order to catch more sun. Cacti and succulents in moist tropical environments often grow up on rocky slopes, kind of to keep their feet out of the wet soil. This next is just another view of my plants in their summer home. I used the plastic trays because it made moving them easier. If you put your plants on saucers, you can't get as many saucers close together as you can in a tray. And also this helped level them out on the boards. But the problem is you have to empty the trays after every rain. It also shows that I was using stones as a top dressing at this point. So, what are the secrets to success? First and foremost, you need to know your plants. It's really helpful to know where they come from, their native habitat conditions, know what they need to grow and to thrive, and try to give it to them. They have the same basics as all plants: light, water, and nutrients. Specifically, cacti and succulents need light. Bright light is best. Place your plants out of doors if you can in the summer and leave them there. 4 to 6 hours direct sunlight is good, along with filtered or dappled sunlight the rest of the day. In my case, my backyard faces mostly east, but it does get 3 to 5 hours of direct sun early in the morning. About 10 or 11 a.m., the big tree in my yard filters the light from the sun overhead. But then about 2 or 3, the sun has moved across enough that the plants get another hour or 2 of direct sun. Now, some plants, not many, some cacti and succulents can get too much sun. With enough sun, succulents will turn beautiful shades of red and orange. And cacti might actually grow kind of a fur, a white fur that blocks the sunlight. This is my Aloe Barbadensis, which commonly known as Aloe Vera. It actually started turning purplish brown, which I didn't mind so much, but then it dried up and kind of withered back from the ends until I put the plants under the bench to keep them out of all of that direct light. Also, fuzzy succulents, you'll see them in the stores. Calanchoe tomentosa, you might see them as chocolate soldier or panda plant. Those also benefit from less sun. Now, as far as water, sparingly, once a week or 2 in the summer, once a month in the winter. Don't water until you see the whites of their eye. Seriously, vast majority of succulents die from overwatering. As I say, once every week or 2 in the summer if it doesn't rain. If it rains, don't water. In the winter, I water my cacti once a month. I water my succulents twice a month. It depends on the plant because some might need a little bit more or some might need a bit less, but I basically water on the 1st and the 15th of every month. The cacti only in the middle, the other succulents on the 1st and the 15th. There are actually some cacti in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile that survive with no rain at all. There is a fog that rolls in off of the ocean once a day, sometimes in the morning, but literally it does not rain for years there, and they survive. So as far as watering, maybe stick your finger in the pot for an inch or 2. If it's moist at all, don't water. My club mentors say drench and drip dry. Bear in mind, however, when you're doing watering, some succulents are warm weather growers, some are cool weather growers. The cool weather growers react to the extreme heat by actually going dormant. So you don't want to water them during the summer, during the hottest part of the summer. They wake up in cooler weathers and then they need to water for growth. An example would be your Haworthias. They love cooler temperatures. It all depends on where they originally came from. When does that area get rain? Does it rain then during the hot weather, or does it rain then during the cool weather? As far as fertilizer goes, I actually haven't used it. I repotted everything in the spring and summer, and I haven't fertilized yet. Too much nitrogen, that weakens growth. I've heard use fertilizer at half the recommended strength. Now there is a tomato-based fertilizer called Tomerite. I've heard that that may actually encourage flowering. I'm going to show you my moon cactus, Gymnocalicium milhanovicii, for several reasons. Notice at the top, Those are flower stalks. They actually grow up out of the areoles and they just kind of push the spines aside. Now, in the interest of true honesty, my flower stalks never opened up. So I haven't seen the flower of this at all. But I'm hopeful this year. This picture also shows the pups, those round balls on the side of the plant. You could actually spin those off and try to root them if they're healthy. The other thing that you can see is this plant is a grafted plant. It's actually two. There's a cacti on top that's grafted to the one on the bottom. And lastly, it shows scarring. I'm sorry, but that was when I carved off some scale that had infected the plant. As far as the substrate goes, when you do repot, be aware that most cacti and succulents are grown commercially in potting soil. That's far too water retentive for your plants. Even the bags that are sold in commercially as cacti and succulent mix probably have too much potting soil. Most of the very successful hobbyists I know make their own soil mix. There are as many secret formulas as there are hobbyists. I'm still experimenting, but this past summer when I repotted, I used 1 part potting soil, 1 part perlite or vermiculite, and 1 part aquarium gravel. One old timer I know says his mix is up to 70 or 80% gravel. Some people mix in coarse sand or sphagnum moss, and I know perlite is not organic. It can be troublesome because it breaks down into dust and it can clog up the drainage. You could use crushed lava rock or coir, which is crushed coconut shell, to help soak up moisture. Just remember, you want the water to run through and out the bottom shortly after being poured. Dump out any water that pools up in the saucer. Don't bring your succulent home and repot right away. Don't repot a wet succulent. Let it dry out first. Give it time to adjust to its surroundings. Unlike tropical plants, don't water it right away. Also, don't water before or after repotting. All this is because root damage done by repotting makes the plants susceptible to fungal disease. This next slide shows 4 different species of opuntias. Those are the bunny ear cacti. They are really hardy. The one in the back left, I bought for $1.87 at Walmart. It's an Opuntia monacantha. The form is called variegata. It's commonly known as Joseph's coat. I wish you could see it closer, but there are actually 3 plants in that pot. On the back right is a plant that grew from a single pad. I'll tell more about this later. In the front are 2 I got for free. I'll tell you the secret in my last tip. At this point in the summer, I was using stones as a top dressing. This next one shows the top dressing that a black aquarium gravel that I started using. This was partly to deprive fungal gnats, pain in the neck, that came in with my plants in early October when I moved my plants to the basement. When the gnats hatch out, they're looking for a place to lay eggs. This next one is an example of don't repot too often. Every couple of years is plenty. Cacti like to be a little bit crowded in the pot. Bigger pot, not better pot. That's the top dressing again that I use. It does help keep the sun from overheating the pot in a small pot, and it does break up raindrops before they can wash out the soil. Clay pot versus plastic pot, you know the pros and cons of both. Many succulent pots are shallower than regular pots, but just be sure whatever pot you use, it has a lot of drainage. Don't use any pot without drainage holes in the bottom. If you plant a terrarium with cacti or succulents, you're kind of condemning them to rot because the humidity is too high in a closed system. Now on this plant, notice the grasshopper bite, dirty little thing, in the upper left. I got this as a single leaf or pad at last year's Christmas party. It didn't root at all during the winter, so it lived on stored moisture. The top of the pad dried out and turned white. It first sprouted on April 20. By July 21, there were all 8 of those ears, the bunny ears. So I actually cracked off the dead portion in October when I brought it in. Now, insects can eat your plants, although most are deterred by cactus spines. Our club president found flies that got impaled on some of the larger spikes when they came in for a landing. You need to inspect your plants often. It will reveal problems before they become big problems. Now we'll talk about the propagating part in a moment. The next one shows more insect damage. Another common pest is mealybugs. Now some of my plants became infected with scale, which is a very tiny insect that attaches itself and sucks the life from the stems. They build a fixed carapace over itself for protection. It kind of looks like a brown bark when they all join together. You can use isopropyl alcohol to swab on to loosen up that scale. You might find spider mites become a problem, but you can spray with a 70% solution of hydrogen peroxide. Don't let me scare you. For the most part, cacti and other succulents are very healthy. Propagating is actually easy from cuttings or pups. It doesn't work with aloes or agaves, but almost everything else. This is a typical mammillaria cactus, Mammillaria spinosissima. Notice the round globular shape. You can see the spines growing from areoles at the top of each mound. Notice also the hair that's starting to grow in between each mound, growing up from the valleys. This is actually a response from the plant to try to shade itself from sun. But now look at another of my mammillaria in March of this past year after not getting enough light during the winter. That was my first year of having cacti and bringing them inside. The only room that I could put them in had an east or north facing window. Just wasn't enough light. So anyway, I saw this Mammillaria laurii, and being a newbie, I thought, well, I'll put it outside. Maybe it would thicken up in the middle and straighten up. Well, guess what? It did get big around on the top, but the middle never did. Now I had a dumbbell on my hands. So I got brave and chopped it into 3 parts at the end of March or April. I let the cut ends just sit and callus up for a week or almost 2, and then I placed the ends down on the surface of the soil. I missed them just a little once a week, and about the end of June, so a month or 2, they finally rooted. The one on the left is the top third of the plant. The one in the middle is the middle third of the plant. It has 1 pup growing on it, and the one on the right is the old bottom third with 4 pups on it. A top view actually shows the pups a little better. They may be harvested and grow into new plants if they're healthy. Remember, these plants usually grow very slowly. So just relax and be patient. Enjoy all their shapes and forms. If you're lucky, the flowers can be very beautiful, but you can't expect them. It's not real easy to get flowers all the time. Many plants won't flower until they reach a certain size or age. The golden barrel cactus, that Echinocactus grusonii, has to be 14 inches in diameter. That's a big cacti. It looks like a mammillaria, but it's got a flat top to it. Anyway, even then, it seldom blooms unless it's grown outside. Here's an example of a sudden, unexpected, sudden growth. Remember my yellow moon cacti? I also had a red one. See it down here in the lower left? I wasn't specifically taking a picture of it, but so I had two of them. Both of my moon cacti got that scale, the brown, crummy stuff. Well, you saw how I carved the scale off of the yellow one. The red one was even worse. So I decided to chop the top off and discard it on August 1st. I kept the bottom part a Hylocereus undata, just to see if that bottom part would grow. Well, within 1 month, whammo, I had this giant sprout on the side. I'll be interested to see what happens next summer. The best place to grow cacti, if you can, is outside. Did you know that there are some cacti that do grow outside in the climate year-round here in DuPage County? The eastern prickly pear cactus, Opuntia fumifasa, is one of them. During the winter, all the moisture drains out of those pads and retreats underground into the roots. The pads kind of deflate like the balloons and they lay flat on the ground. In spring, they plump up and start growing. You will have to amend their soil with plenty of sand and gravel to promote drainage, but they are really pretty hard. Remember back at the beginning of my talk, I said I'd tell you how you could get all the plants you want for free? It's easy, and all because of how readily succulents propagate in cacti pups root. When you go to a big box store and you look at their displays, keep your eye on the floor or the shelf around the plant. You'll often find leaves that have fallen from the main plant or been knocked off by rough handling. If you pick those leaves up, you're actually helping the workers. They would be thrown up and swept away and thrown away. Instead, bring them home and lay them in a sunny spot on the shelf or bare soil. In a few days to up to a few weeks, the leaf will begin to sprout roots. You may then plant it and begin watering lightly. And guess what? A baby plant will grow from the end of the leaf where the roots are. The next couple of slides are only for those who are interested in this kind of stuff, so I'll go through them quickly. Scientific nomenclature is a tree of classification. Remember the euphorbia with the thorns? This shows a few of the interesting shapes and forms, other forms of that same genus. You know what else is a euphorbia? Our poinsettia plants, our Euphorbia deuterium. Now I'm tickled by some of the more interesting scientific names, like the Myrtello cactus geometrizans that we talked about. Your common Boston fern, that name is Nephrolepsis exultata bostoniensis. Isn't that great? I love that. But of all of them, I think the moon cactus takes the cake. The top part, yellow or red, that's called the Gymnocalycium mihanovicii. The bottom part is not always, but often, Hylocereus undata. We started with an echeveria, so we'll end up with an echeveria. I'm going to skip the disclosure I was going to make, but I'll tell you about it later if you want. Thank you all very much, and I wish you success with your succulents.
All right, thank you, Mark. I'm gonna actually do my video if I can figure that one out. We'll just leave it off. So like I said before, if you want to ask questions, just type them into the chat, and we've got a few already. The first one is, how do you keep the insects away from these plants?
Out of doors, I actually have not figured a way to do that. I tend to glance at them every morning. If I find a slug or something around the base of the plant, I'll pick it off and throw it away. If I find a fly or something hovering above it, hopefully not. But hey, these cacti are tough. I figure the fly is taking his own chances by trying to land on them. I have heard that you can sprinkle some things around the pot or the plant, but I'm not sure what that would be. I haven't tried it yet.
Okay, the next question is, how do you handle the plants when you're repotting them?
That's a great question. There are several ways to do that. You can roll up a piece of paper, fold it into strips so that you get 4 or 5 or 6 thicknesses, and then use that to grab the plant, to hang on to it. You can buy thick, and I mean thick, leather gloves or the typical rubber glove that you might use to garden with. It won't work on the big spines, but something thick and maybe made out of leather is good as well. You could use a spatula, a kitchen spatula. No, that's not the right word. The tongs that you use to grab something in the kitchen. You should try that.
Okay. Jamie said, I'd heard this referred to as prop lifting, and I'm not sure if she meant when you were picking up the pups from the floor of the hardware store or wherever you're getting the things from.
Yeah, I haven't heard that term. Nobody has accused me of theft yet, picking leaves up off of the floor. She may have been referring to the practice when we talked about the desert rose plant, where they're lifted up and potted higher up. That's done just to make them look better. Many bonsai enthusiasts do that because the bottom of the bulgy stem looks like that baobab tree over in Africa.
Okay, that makes sense. Terry says, very interesting, Mark. I learned much that I didn't know. Thank you. Wendy is asking, what month is good to move succulents? Do the plants grow larger if you bring them outside in summer?
Yeah, yes, I definitely think they grow larger. They green up better. They will more likely sprout leaves for the succulents or flowers for the cacti. Not everybody can, but if you can, I think they are better off outside. But you have to be careful because you wouldn't want to do it when there was a risk of frost. So maybe bring them out middle of May, bring them in. I brought mine in October 1st.
Okay. Julie said, thank you. You did a great job. It was very interesting. Janet said, I miss what you do when you take a fallen leaf. How does it grow roots before planting? You want to just review that for her?
You don't have to do anything. I don't want people to get the wrong impression. Not every leaf will sprout roots, but 3 out of 5, 4 out of 6, 5 out of 8 will sprout roots. And be patient. You need to put them in a fairly sunny, bright place. Sometimes you'll find them in the store on the shelf, and they've already started roots. They'll get little white roots coming out of that cut end, the end that fell off. So you don't actually do anything. That's the plant striving to survive.
Okay. Marilyn said, learn some new growing points. Thanks, Mark. And Kathleen is asking, what is your favorite genus of succulents?
Oh man. Originally, I would have said the Echeverias because there are so many different colors and leaf shapes and curve. But there are so many interesting succulents that I can't really decide. I like the jade plants. I really like the opuntia that Joseph's coach that I told you about. That one, probably my favorite.
Okay, I'm doing a last call for questions. I think I've gotten to all the ones that I saw in the chat, and then just one last comment. Janet said, "Say this was great. Thank you," with the smiley face.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Mark from Gale. All right, I am going to actually stop the recording. So thank you very much, Mark.